our anniversary of the Railroad Museum. I'm glad you could come down. We hoped we'd get more people, but we didn't. And share this event with us. I'm Don Davis, Truckee Railroad Society, and I'm manager of this, what we call the interim museum. We're planning to build a big museum later, and Jim will say a few words about that in a moment. We did plan to have the high school jazz band, and maybe that's the difference in our crowd. We had them last year, and we had this full. They came to see us instead of the museum. I don't know. But turns out that today is SAT day. And I looked at the calendar and noticed and saw SAT and didn't think a thing of it because yesterday was Friday.
That's planning, guys. Dave didn't schedule.
Well, that felt like it was fun, but anyway, I'd like to report a few things about the interim museum here. We call it, like I say, we call it the interim museum because we're building a real museum to be put down in the rail yard about a mile east of here. We opened this museum almost exactly 1 year ago today, on Train Day 2010. In that year, we've had over 6,000 people come through our door. Over 25% of them are Truckee residents, and almost 2% come from some other country. And the rest come from in between. We're constantly working on the display. Since opening, we've added a conceptual model of our planned museum. We've made some minor improvements to the logging display, and we have added a video display to help us tell the story of the snow removal and some other history stories. We had hoped to have the new diorama telling the story of the transcontinental tunnels here by now, but the guy that's building it, his wife decided that they need to go to Europe for a vacation instead, so we didn't make it. But as we're learning also that displays take a lot longer than planned. In the near future, we're adding a display of a Shay locomotive to better show how the logging railroads negotiated their steep grades and their tight curves. And to mark the 150th anniversary of the Civil War, we're looking for a display telling of how the Civil War led to building the railroad here and led to Truckee being here. Most people don't realize that there is a very strong connection with that. And hopefully we're going to get the Roumette restoration finished this year. Hopefully. Lastly, I want to thank those of you who worked as docents during the year. I would especially like to recognize Ignacio Cortez here, who's been our yeoman docent. He's here almost every Saturday, or almost every weekend, so I would like to give him a hand. And I have a short list of tasks that need doing over on the side there if you're interested in joining us and seeing something that you'd like to join in the fun and help do. If there's something that attracts you, see me either today or my contact information is on the bottom of the sheet, and I'll see what we can do to get you involved. Jim, you want to come up and say a couple, 3 words on our plans for the big museum?
Thank you, Don. My name is Jim Hood. I'm the president of the Truckee Railroad Society, and I want to just say a few words about the future museum that we want to build. I want to talk just a minute about some of the brief history of the railroad, and I'll tie it into what we want to do with the permanent museum. There's a man named Theodore Judah that probably, other than people with these funny hats on, don't know who that is. And there's another group of people called the Big Four Railroad Barons that probably everybody does know. The story of how this railroad actually came to be here is really an interesting story, and it's one that we want to tell over and over and over again. But this railroad that's here right now was really a result primarily of the vision of a man named Theodore Judah. Theodore was a railroad surveyor. He started in about 1850 to try to find a path through the Sierras that would be suitable to build a railroad. He actually finally completed his survey and determined that this was one of the segments that needed it, where it would be located. And he finally finished his survey in 1860. You think, well, okay, he's a surveyor. Well, he also happened to be a real promoter. He actually lobbied Congress in Washington, D.C. to get the railroad approved. He actually was given a room in the Capitol building where he made a little story of how the railroad could be put through the Sierras, and basically lobbied Congress to get that approved. The law that was signed in 1862 by President Lincoln that established the railroad, and that this would in fact be the first transcontinental railroad built. In addition to lobbying Congress, Theodore also worked to get the money to build it. So he presented his whole vision and concept all over the state to wealthy people in San Francisco, and he finally got 4 people in Sacramento to be the people that were going to fund it. And these were not people who were railroad people. Leland Stanford was in fact a wholesale grocer, and it became governor, during this whole process. Charles Crocker ran a dry goods business. Hopkins and Huntington were both had stores in Sacramento, basically selling to the people that were coming up for the gold rush, selling them the picks, the shovels, and so forth. So these 4 people that we now know as the railroad barons, in fact, had nothing to do, had no experience in railroad, but they had the vision, and I think they may have been the inventors of the concept of creative financing, because the methods that they used to actually finance this railroad were quite incredible and probably wouldn't pass scrutiny today. So the kind of my purpose in talking about this very early history of the railroad is to really point out that it takes people a vision to make something happen, and it takes people with exceptional skills and a combination of skills to really create something of value. About 10 years ago, there were a group of people here in Truckee, mostly railroad enthusiasts, model railroaders, and so forth, that came up with the vision of creating a museum, a permanent museum here in Truckee, to tell the story of the history of the railroad and the history of Truckee. And it's quite an interesting series of stories. It's not just the building of the Transcontinental Railroad, which was an absolutely phenomenal task, but it's also the story of the lumber industry. It's the story of the tourist industry. They're all tied very closely with the railroad. Even our jail here is closely tied with the people associated with the railroad. So there's a very, very strong history. There's some other things back on Jammu Street that tie into the railroad also, but I'm not going to go into those.
Details.
right. So the museum that we want to build is not going to be the kind of museum that you normally see that has a bunch of dusty old cases with pieces of railroad artifacts in it and a whole long thing to read about what it is that you're seeing. but the museums that are built today are really a combination of entertainment, information, but they have to be told in a way that will engage people that are our generation and the younger generation that tell the stories in ways that they're normally getting the information that they get today. So it's going to be a very interactive kind of set of displays. It's going to be really a great deal of visual information to tell people the story and really to make sure that the history that's here doesn't get lost. So that's really our purpose. We've been working with a number of people who have agreed to help us build this kind of museum. Scott, who just went over, I think, just went on potty break. But Scott is an architect in Tahoe City, and he's agreed to work with us to really, start laying out the concept of the buildings and where we want to be. The museum, where we would like to locate it, is going to be at the very east end of the rail yard expansion. And part of the reason for that is we need to have access to the rails themselves in order to bring exhibits into the museum. So it'll be, we're looking at a couple of different locations at the east end, and the other question then is, when are we going to do it? And our goal, we have set as the society, our goal is the 150th anniversary of the first train that made it to this track from Sacramento. The 150th anniversary will occur in 2018, and that's the date we would like to be able to open the museum. Ted asked me one day, is that date when we're going to break ground or we're going to open? And I said, yes. One of those. So
that depends.
yeah. So we've recently established a building and land subcommittee within the society. We have established a money-raising group within the society and a finance group, so we're now looking for people to join with us and work on those committees to make this really happen. So that's kind of the history of, that's kind of the story of what we want to do with the permanent museum.
Yeah, it's kind of terrifying. It is to be in there with somebody that's
Oh, sorry.